All right, today we're going to be talking about when you should text your ex after the no contact rule. And just to put this conversation to rest, yes, I am of the belief that if you want to get an ex back after no contact, you're going to need to contact them. Now, I know that sounds like common sense, but believe it or not, there's actually a lot of coaches and articles out there that tell you to either not reach out after a no contact rule or wait too long to reach out after a no contact rule. So really, this video is going to be focusing not only on answering if you should be reaching out to them, but a little bit about how you should be reaching out to them and when the right time frame is for that. And I'm going to let you in on a pretty cool acronym, pun intended, literally cool. C, completed no contact. O, Outgrowth Mentality. O, Open-Ended Questions. L, leave the conversation relatively quickly. This is going to be your roadmap for basically answering when you should text your ex after a no contact rule. So let's first start with something that seems like common sense. The C, the beginning of the acronym. Completing no contact. Now, again, this probably seems like common sense to you, but there are actually a lot of articles out there that specifically will recommend people to say something along the lines of why experts think you shouldn't reach out during no contact. Now, the articles basically go on to argue that reaching out after the no contact rule is bad because it basically causes you to re-obsess over your ex. Here's my thoughts. It wholly depends on if you're trying to get over them or get them back. So before you even enter into a no contact rule, you need to have that one singular question answered. You need to know whether or not you're going to be trying to use the no contact rule as an attempt to get them back or use the no contact rule as an attempt to get over them. And that's going to change your trajectory of if you should be reaching out to them or not. Now, obviously, if you're trying to use a no contact rule to get over your ex, you probably shouldn't be reaching out to your ex after them. But the vast majority of people probably listening to this video or even typing this into YouTube or Google, they're going to be wanting their exes back. However, reaching out to them is a must, and you must do it the correct way. How? Well, I'm going to cover that in a second, but let's talk about completing the no contact rule first. The C in our acronym, if you will. Now, it needs to kind of go without saying that you shouldn't text your ex until after you've completed a no contact rule. Here's the interesting thing, though. The only versions of no contact that I've personally ever studied are the time frames we've recommended on our website and on our YouTube channel. So basically, we recommend no contact rules no longer than 45 days. So the shortest no contact rule we recommend is a 21-day rule, the longest a 45-day rule. We tend to be against longer periods of no contact like 60 days or 90 days because usually they tend to be so long that it gives an ex a chance to kind of move on from you. So to be hyper specific, we believe you shouldn't contact your ex until after you've completed a no contact rule of at least 21 to 45 days. If it's not been 21 days, then don't reach out. If it's been longer than 45 days, then it's time to reach out, assuming you've got the rest of the cool acronym covered. Let's move on to arguably the most important part of the acronym, which is the first O, the outgrowth mentality. This is really where the rubber meets the road for most people watching this video. In 2020, I personally started researching a lot of success stories and figuring out what made them successful, and I noticed a really interesting trend. Successes kind of got into this idea of outgrowing their exes. And really, what's fascinating is the people who are successful at quote-unquote getting their exes back spent all of their time during no contact trying to outgrow their exes, trying to find something that they cared about just as much as their ex that they can pour their time into. And really, it's in pursuit of answering one singular question. If I don't get my ex back, will I be okay? And if you can't say yes to that question by the end of no contact, your no contact rule, in my opinion, has been a failure. So someone who hasn't outgrown their ex can't really imagine a life without their ex. Someone who has can. Now, oftentimes you hear me talking about finding a magnum opus. I personally noticed that a lot of the success stories had something that they were extremely passionate about, more so than their ex, that they spent and poured their time into. And perhaps that's the main separating factor from the way we teach no contact versus our peers. Our peers often focus on the superficial aspects, oh, look, it's going to make your ex miss you. We focus on the internal aspects. Oh, look, this is going to make it to where you're not missing your ex. But this creates kind of an interesting paradox. What happens theoretically at the end of 45 days if you haven't achieved this mentality? What if you are just as obsessed with your ex as you've always been? Well, according to the C acronym, you can't go past 45 days without reaching out. But what happens if you haven't gotten to the right mentality at 45 days? Well, this is where it gets a little difficult. In that particular case, I'm actually a strong believer that it's worth risking the chance that an ex could begin to get over you so that you can basically get over them. We've seen time and time again that between the two factors of basically completing a no contact rule successfully and outgrowing your ex during that no contact rule, making sure you have the right outgrowth mindset is far more important because yes, while the clock is certainly ticking, there is risk with extending a no contact rule to achieve the outgrowth mentality. The risk, in my opinion, would be greater if you reached out to your ex without achieving the proper mindset. Make no mistake about it. It's not like you have an infinite amount of time during the no contact rule. And if you spend all your time wasting it, obsessing about your ex, you are literally wasting the clock's time, so to speak.
Real quick, I want to say that if you're new to this YouTube channel or you're trying to figure out what you should be doing to get your ex back and you're trying to learn if you even have a chance in your specific circumstance, probably the smartest thing for you to do is actually stop by our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, or take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz that can be found at exboyfriendrecovery.com. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, taking that free quiz is super easy to do. All you have to simply do is look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on the link you see there. It will take you directly to the quiz where you can fill it out and get an easy answer on what you should be doing going forward and overall what your chances look like in your specific situation. All right, so let's get you back to the video.
Well, let's assume that you've gotten to this place emotionally where you've outgrown your ex. You actually have a better chance of succeeding in recovery from the mindset versus proceeding from the wrong mindset. Let's move on to the next O, which is open-ended questions. So I've talked a lot about how to properly text an ex after the no contact rule on my website, podcast, YouTube channel. You basically have a hook, a type of bait that causes your ex to get engaged, something that provides a lot of mystery and hype, but it needs to be the right type of hook. So for example, one of the biggest mistakes I ever personally made when I was starting out was recommending men and women to text the following phrase to their ex: I have a confession to make. It's a great hook. It really is. In fact, it yielded over a 90% response rate. But the flaw with it is that it immediately brought the ex to a negative headspace, and they would often put those negative emotions onto you. So whenever possible, you want to bring your ex to a positive headspace. Not to mention that particular hook, I have a confession to make, isn't really even an open-ended question. Rather, it's an ominous statement. Additionally, you need to try to veer the text you're sending towards your ex's interests as opposed to yours to ensure more favorable results. But really, where most of our clients make mistake with the first text after no contact is they don't really frame their hook as an open-ended question, or they don't embed that into the conversation. It's best to think of this sort of like a math problem. So to get the best results post no contact, you really need to combine 3 specific elements together in a very creative way. You need to have a hook, you need to have interests, focusing on your ex's interest, and you need to have an open-ended question. And if you can do all those three things in the span of maybe 1 or 2 text messages, generally speaking, you get positive responses. So what's an example of this going well? Well, I thought maybe the best example I could find is taking a real-life question from our private Facebook support group where someone's really struggling with crafting a first contact text message and show you what we came up with. So let's just break it down for you. The client basically wants to send a typical damsel in distress text message. She wants to send, I need your drum expertise and I trust you above anyone else. Then she'll wait for a response and then she'll respond to him. Misty and I are going to start a Women's Day circle here. I'd like to find a drum like the AT drum. What kind is it? Now remember, there are 3 things that a good first contact text message needs. It needs a hook, it needs an interest, basically focusing on your ex's interests, and it needs an open-ended question. This specific text or text conversation technically has all 3 elements. It has the hook, I need your help. It has the interest-based thing. Obviously, her ex is interested in drums. And it has an open-ended question. What kind of drum should I get? Now, don't get me wrong. The text itself here, it's not bad. In fact, I think alone it probably has a really great chance of getting a response, but we want to make sure that the text messages are presented in the best way possible. And in my opinion, there are some tiny errors in the presentation. And one of our moderators flagged some of these errors and suggested changing basically the text to this: I need to tap into your drum expertise. Then you wait for a response. I'm looking to buy an AT drum or something comparable. What would you recommend? So immediately the first big change that we're seeing here is that our moderator basically went all in on the hook as an initial first text. She removed the "I only trust you above anyone else" from the initial client's sort of suggestion. Why? Well, the smartest approach is to not appear as if you're immediately complimenting an ex. And obviously saying, "I only trust you above anyone else" could be appearing as a compliment. So just by removing that and going all in on the hook, it might actually be more effective. The second change was the actual open-ended question. It's a lot more business-like and direct. Before, the client had a text saying, "Misty and I are going to start a Women's Day circle here. I'd like to find a drum like the AT drum. What kind is that?" The recommended changes were, "I'm looking into buying an AT drum or something comparable." That's the interest. "What would you recommend?" That's the open-ended question. It's shorter, a lot more to the point. Also, the open-ended question is slightly different. It uses the word "you," which indicates you are making the text all about your ex. Of course, I personally would alter the text actually a little bit more, because technically that "you" embedded into the open-ended question is offset by an "I." So I'm looking into buying an AT drum or something comparable. That's the interest. What would you recommend? So you have one "I" and one "you." But I would actually go all in on making it about your ex. Let's talk about the thing that they want to talk about the most, and that is obviously themselves. So here's my change, the further alteration. You know everything about AT drums. Interest. Need some help buying one. What would you recommend? Notice how in my version, there is no first-person perspective indicators. There's no "I," "me," or "my." But there is a lot of "yous." Now, this indicates the text is all about your ex and not about you. And what do exes love talking more about anything else? They love about talking about themselves. Totally messed up the delivery on that one, but you get the picture. Which leads us to kind of the final aspect of our cool acronym, which is the L, leaving the conversation relatively quickly. So this is the final phase of the acronym, and this is all about leaving a conversation kind of quickly. So when I first started ex-boyfriend recovery, I noticed that a major issue that many of our clients had was that they were getting seduced by the length of conversations. They'd overstay their welcome and ultimately scare their exes off. So why would that happen? Well, oftentimes what would happen is you're in this no contact rule. You're kind of not doing the outgrowth thing. You're obsessing about your ex a little bit too much. And then when you finally get to talk to them again, you just kind of don't want it to end, and you overstay your welcome, and they just kind of get reminded that you are the same version of yourself that you were maybe before the breakup, and that brings some of the trauma of the relationship back and causes them to back away. So I want to make this really simple for you. You don't want to have a long conversation with your ex after a no contact rule immediately. In fact, it's better to get in and get out. Slowly establish communication and basically live to fight another day. Remember, tide theory is a thing. You want to slowly, organically have conversations unfold that get longer and more frequent and more intense as you're going. So what does that mean? Well, let's use our client's text that we just talked about as an example. She asks her ex about the drum stuff. He responds, giving her information. She says thank you, then ends the conversation. A first contact text exchange with your ex after a no contact rule isn't supposed to be one where you win them back. It's really just about establishing communication. All of the get them back type conversations happen afterward, and they happen very slowly and they're drawn out. So in essence, get in, get out, and you give yourself the best chance of succeeding.